to the heroism of the resistance fighters, past, present, and future, this work is respectfully dedicated.
So, whatever happened to that now classic, bizarre television event, part sci-fi, part horror, and part social commentary, the 1983 miniseries V? Let's find out.
Movies, music, and monsters. Danger.
Hey, my friends, Dan Monroe here, talking about movies, music, and monsters. Wow! V! I certainly remember not only watching this miniseries back in the early 1980s, but prior to that, the enormous hype that was built up around this show prior to it coming out, the posters, the billboards, the magazine ads, pretty much everywhere you looked, we saw something about the visitors are coming, which certainly did pique my interest, not to only know who the heck they were, but where the heck they were coming from and what the heck they were gonna do when they got here. The backstory on the origin of this super fun but super weird show was not only super interesting, but I learned a heck of a lot of things that I never knew before that I now get to share with all of you guys. So, grab your alien mothership with your overly friendly intergalactic visitor with a tearaway face and a bucket of stale popcorn, and let's dive in.
We have come in peace to all mankind.
Super huge thanks and shout out to my friends James Small and Michael Scarola for supplying a ton of great information and photos that I now get to share with all of you guys. So this entire franchise started off with a 2-episode miniseries in 1983, then in 1984 we got another miniseries, and following that a near complete season containing 19 episodes, and I always thought it was really interesting that when this miniseries first premiered in 1983, the story we were watching unfold on screen also happened to be 1983, giving the entire production a slightly scary, real-world look into what actually might be happening outside our own doors and windows right now on Earth today.
The visitors are our friends. Really, they are.
You know, it's interesting. One of the main ways you could tell that a person was a visitor was the very unique voice. There was like this lower subharmonic sound to each of their voices, excuse me, that would immediately identify them as alien visitors. So, if you ever hear anybody that actually has that sound, I would certainly be careful because quite possibly they themselves are reptilian visitors from...
Ahem.
What?
You're giving it away.
Whoops. Okay, there we go.
Nobody saw nothing.
So, for all you guys out there who never saw, or in this case, I should say, experienced this super cool TV show, V is basically the story of an enormous fleet of 50 gigantic saucer-shaped motherships arriving on Earth, appearing human, although requiring special glasses to protect their eyes, referred to only as the visitors. They come in peace.
Yeah, we've all heard that one before.
Looking to obtain a trade deal with Earth, some of Earth's chemicals and minerals that the visitors need on their own home world in exchange for advanced technology. Sounds like a super mutually beneficial deal to me. I mean, come on, what could possibly go wrong?
You mean other than a complete takeover of the Earth by lizard people who want to steal our water and eat us?
Well, when you gotta go and put it that way. Anyway, a Earth resistance strike force is formed. Basically, the alien visitors take over the Earth, and that's pretty much the end. Well, sort of, but not quite, with the initial inspiration for the show coming from a book written in 1935 called It Can't Happen Here by Sinclair Lewis, a dystopian political novel about the rise of a dictator and the fascist takeover of America, and in 1982, just 1 year before the release of the original miniseries, director and producer Kenneth Johnson wrote an adaptation of this show called Storm Warnings, which he presented to NBC, but the studio executives, in their infinite wisdom, rejected the script, thinking it was just too intelligent for the average stupid American viewer.
Wow. Really?
You betcha. So basically, the entire script had to be altered or dumbed down for us lowly TV watchers who clearly didn't get enough edumacation, exchanging the bad guys out for extraterrestrial lizard aliens, still hoping to capitalize on the success of the Star Wars franchise. You know, the visitors may have shown up from a galaxy far, far away with hopes of enslaving humanity, making fast food meals out of our neighbors, and stealing all of our precious earthly water. However, if I recall, there was one thing they were never able to steal anywhere in the world, and that was the personal identity or credit card numbers of any member of the Resistance, because they used today's sponsor, Aura Online Security, your all-in-one protection from identity theft, scams, online threats. These days, more than ever, big companies with crappy security are getting hacked constantly, and your personal information is being sold on this creepy place called the dark web, where spammers and scammers can target you, your credit card, your identity, your family, pretty much anything. You know, I started using Aura about 8 months ago when they first reached out to me, and I gotta tell you, if nothing else, I'm certainly sleeping a little bit better at night knowing that Aura keeps all of my information safe online 24 hours a day. They identify if data brokers are selling my information and automatically submit opt-out requests on my behalf. I'm definitely seeing less spam in my inbox, and remember that creepy dark web thing? Well, Aura continuously monitors the dark web and alerts me if they find any of my personal information exposed, with literally a $5 million identity theft insurance protection if, God forbid, the worst scenario ever actually happened. So, with the odds of you falling victim to online crime being only 1 in 4, why not? Plus, with a 60-day money-back guarantee, fraud specialists available 24/7, and tons of parental controls, including a VPN, I'm telling you, you are crazy if you don't just take a look. So give them a try at my link, aura.com/Dan Monroe, for a free 14-day trial, or simply click the link in the description and start sleeping better knowing your information is really safe. And now back to V. At a whopping cost of $13 million, which was a whole heck of a lot of money to spend on a TV miniseries back in the early 1980s, the show's production schedule was on an enormously tight rush to be ready for May 1983, leaving Kenneth Johnson only 19 days to not only finalize the script, but prepare for production, which would eventually end up being the most expensive miniseries ever produced for television, even though neither the director or the network knew that yet. Kenneth Johnson. You may not know that name, but you certainly know some of the shows he helped create. He was one of the head writers on The $6 Million Man, and was even the guy solely responsible for creating the character of Jamie Summers, the Bionic Woman. Video on her coming soon. Stay tuned for that. Later on, he oversaw the creation of the TV version of The Incredible Hulk.
Traditionally, the audience for science fiction is young males. And my work, from The Bionic Woman through The Incredible Hulk, through V, even in Alien Nation, has always been a much broader demographic than that. The largest audience for my work, oddly enough, is female. It seems that it has to do with the fact, I guess, that I focus on relationship and character more than anything else. That, to me, is always the driving cornerstone of whatever I've done. People saw that it was about something, that there was a depth and a substance to it, which was unusual in science fiction television.
So, as production dates grew near, casting this epic miniseries took center stage with Mark Singer playing Mike Donovan. I always liked Mark Singer back in the day. Beastmaster was a super fun film, but before that, I remember him in an episode of the 1974 Planet of the Apes TV show.
It's an adventure story. It's a mystery, and it's an adventure, but it also touches on the way human behavior works. The guy that I'm playing is Mike Donovan. He's a person that tries his best to live up to the promise of being a human being. He feels a sense of responsibility toward other people, so he doesn't lie down under the yoke when the Earth is being taken over.
Faye Grant as Juliet Parrish, the leader of the Resistance. Jane Badler as Diana, the second in command, and who, I have to admit, looked pretty darn good, sporting that there red jumpsuit, and holy Jiminy Christmas, did that woman have some talent, the way she could dislodge her jaw and get her mouth so wide open.
Where are we going with this?
Certainly would be quite convenient at times if she ever really wanted to.
Easy there, pal.
Eat guinea pigs. What the heck did you think I was going to say?
Just making sure this show stays PG.
Super fun to see Robert Englund in the series as Willie, obviously best known for his future ominous portrayal of Frederick Krueger in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise.
Frederick? Freddy Krueger.
Whatever, and a whole slew of, to me, more or less unknown actors at the time, but still pretty darn good for what they were doing. Jason Bernard was just awesome as Caleb, one of my favorite actors from the 80s. He was absolutely hilarious with Steve Martin in the film All of Me in 1984, Michael Durrell as Robert Maxwell, Peter Nelson as Brian, David Packer, who did an awesome job playing young Daniel Bernstein, Andrew Prine as Stephen, Michael Wright as Elias Taylor, Neva Patterson, Tommy Peterson, Leonardo Samino, and so many more. We could literally be here all day. Really sad and tragic, but production was halted for 2 weeks when the 22-year-old Poltergeist actress, Dominique Dunn, who was originally cast to play the part of Robin Maxwell, was freaking murdered outside her apartment by her boyfriend while rehearsing with David Packer, the guy who played Daniel, and Kenneth Johnson dedicated the entire miniseries to her memory. There were so many characters and subplots within this 4-hour miniseries that in the original early versions of the script that was shown to network executives, Kenneth Johnson didn't even have names for them, just descriptions of their characters in the script, like man with camera and woman with eyebrow. I mean, there was a whole heck of a lot of subplots going on in this show. So many a times, if you're really not paying attention, you can miss details or lose track of who said what or went where. But overall, I think they did a really good job blending everything together into an extremely memorable and fun 4 hours of network television. The spaceships in the show were really super cool, mostly built by the late great prop builder Greg Jean and his crew, the brilliant special effects guy who created not only the enormous mothership from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, among tons of other things, but also semi-restored the original Lost in Space hero robot costume for Kevin Burns in 1990. These incredible models were made in at least 3 different scales, a very small scale for shots that didn't require a whole lot of detail, a large scale, probably 1/6 or so, for footage requiring close-up shots of the hero models, and then the full-scale mock-ups for the actors to act and interact with. Each of the models and full-scale props were modular, so that various different versions could be made, even though the nose and the tail sections remained the same. This is super cool. The toy spaceship that the kids are playing with on the front lawn was actually a filming miniature from the show. However, it was never actually used in any practical special effects for the show. The miniatures, like the full-size mock-up, were also modular. You can tell by the number of windows and sections in this particular model that it was probably quickly thrown together from spare production parts specifically for that scene. The laser effects used in the show were extremely costly at the time due to the fact that the post-production work was done manually, adding optical effects to the film. So it was at this point that they decided that the human resistance fighters would, use regular rifles and pistols, which not only made their characters a little more earthly, but made the production a whole heck of a lot cheaper. Keep in mind, and this is really interesting, up until the late 1970s, the concept with American audiences of the giant miniseries wasn't really a thing yet. These long, movie-length episodes being broadcast consecutively over several nights until the epic miniseries Roots premiered, which changed everything in the early 1980s with other television events like The Winds of War, Shogun, Lace, North and South, and of course, V, which did have one unique characteristic in that it was a completely unique and original story for the most part, not something translated to television from a book or a novel. V was an enormous hit when it finally premiered in May 1983, and obviously with greedy network executives, if there's more money to be made, let's just crank out some more of them, and Johnson knew there wasn't enough of a budget to sustain an entire TV series, so he suggested a second miniseries to Warner Brothers, who surprisingly said no. Warner Brothers wanted a full series, so in the end they agreed to do both. NBC would get a 6-hour sequel miniseries, and Warner Brothers would get a separate television series. And of course, here comes the Hollywood politics. Warner Brothers contacted Johnson and told him that even though he was contracted to both write and direct the sequel, they wanted another director. Why? Money, of course. The executives felt that Johnson might just spend a little too much time focusing on those minor things in a story, like details and continuity. Anyway, V, the Final Battle, premiered on network television in May 1984, essentially the story of the Resistance, now in full swing, eventually leading up to a defeat of the Visitors with the infamous Red Dust campaign. In my opinion, it was pretty obvious that this second miniseries didn't quite hit the same mark as the original, completely due to the fact that Johnson was gone, but audiences and, more importantly, the network seemed to be happy with the results. One fantastic part of the final battle was, of course, Michael Ironside, who was pretty much great in just about anything he ever did, and this second miniseries was a hit, and you know what that means? Weekly TV series, weekly income from the sponsors, money, but now with an even lower budget slashed literally in half. I'm not going to spend too much time on the series in this video. I'll probably do a dedicated video to the TV series in the near future, but it picks up about a year after the events of the final battle. The Resistance has disbanded, but the Visitors are back once again to take over the Earth with all their wacky lizard shenanigans. It was okay, not as good as the miniseries. I'm not gonna sit here and put it down though, because I'm sure there was a lot of people out there that really liked it. Let's just say the TV series isn't something that I watch personally on a regular basis. You know, I rarely, if ever, say this about any of the movies or TV shows that I talk about, but I really wasn't all that much of a fan of the musical score. I mean, this enormous epic came across in a visually gorgeous cinematic fashion, but then the music, I thought, sounded more like just typical 1980s TV music, which, I mean, obviously it was, by the talented Joe Harnell, who also composed music for The Incredible Hulk, Santa Barbara, The Bionic Woman. I just really think that had this miniseries had a real theatrical cinematic score underneath it, it really would have boosted the overall impact on the viewer. But again, folks, that is just my opinion. Okay, but whatever happened to all the super cool costumes and props from the show? Well, believe it or not, quite a bit actually does still exist out there. Here's one of the Visitor uniforms that sold last year at a Julien's auction for a little over $800. A Visitor security pass from V The Final Battle, selling back in 2021 for over $1,200. This is so freaking cool. Here's an original Visitor laser pistol from the production that sold back in 2017 at a heritage auction for over $1,300. One of the actual Visitor mothership flying miniatures used in the production. This type of miniature was specifically used in the opening sequence of the TV series as the motherships were seen in the foreground of the moon, selling back in 2023 at a Julien's auction for $6,500. A second Visitor mothership model, similar to the last one, was sold at a prop store auction in 2024 for over $7,500. Now we're hitting some of the really expensive stuff. Here's an entire Visitor shock trooper costume, including the helmet, which sold in 2023 for almost $7,000. Here's the model of the Visitor shuttle miniature from the show, selling just this past year in 2024 for over $8,000, and this is super cool. An original Visitor laser rifle with scope, selling back in 2023 at a heritage auction for over $20,000. And here's the big one, the original Visitor Sky Fighter filming miniature with landing gear, still in unbelievable condition, selling back in 2023 for $37,500. I mean, come on, say it with me. How cool is that? And what about all those super cool V toys and collectibles? Well, believe it or not, there really wasn't very much at all. In 1985, a company called LJN did plan on releasing some vehicles, ships, and action figures, but when the series was canceled after one show shy of a full season, that plan was dropped. The company did, however, produce a very popular 12-inch doll of a enemy Visitor, complete with removable face and even a tongue that sticks out of the mouth. The super recognizable Visitor blaster was eventually released, but not as a V toy, but rather a Arco laser blaster target game set. There was also a LGN 42-inch tall inflatable Visitor bop bag, and finally everyone's favorite, the good old-fashioned metal lunchbox. V was released on VHS videotape during the mid-1990s in its original 4x3 3 full-screen television format, meaning square, but this is really interesting. When director Kenneth Johnson originally filmed the miniseries, even though it was being shown on square televisions, he shot everything in what was called widescreen safe, in the event that V ever got an overseas theatrical release, which it didn't, but the fact that he did it that way came in super handy in 2001 when the original miniseries was released on DVD, this time in the 16:9 widescreen format, and a high-definition Blu-ray release in August 2019. This show had and still has one of the largest fan bases out there. Check out the members of this super cool group called the Visitor Fleet, keeping the memory of V alive right down to the lizard baby and the vehicles. Incredibly detailed costumes and weapons with members literally all over the world. Check this group out on Facebook. Link in the description. And what about all the remakes, reboots, and God help us, reimaginings? Well, for years, Kenneth Johnson was trying to revive the entire V series and even wrote a sequel novel called V, The Second Generation, which picks up 20 years after the original miniseries, completely ignoring the final battle and the TV series, but Warner Brothers wasn't interested and opted for a complete reimagining instead, which premiered on ABC in 2009, ran for, I think, 2 seasons. I mean, I've heard good things about it, but honestly, I've never seen it. I'll have to take a look at that and get back to you. However, in 2018, Desilu Studios announced that it would be producing a feature film of V to be written and directed once again by Kenneth Johnson. But due to issues with CBS and Desilu, really weird legal stuff, look it up yourself, it just never happened, and it really is kind of a shame. It would have been really interesting to see what Johnson would have done all these years later, but that's Hollywood. V was not only a highly beloved miniseries with both critics and audiences alike, filling our imaginations with what it might be like if a hostile alien race ever attempted a complete takeover of Earth, but also perfectly took its place among other incredible shows like Sequest, Earth 2, Falling Skies, Invasion, Colony, Alien Nation, Roswell, The X-Files, and so many more. We could be here all day, but that, my friends, is the topic of another video. I really hope you guys enjoyed that deep dive on V, and if you did and you like this kind of stuff, please consider subscribing to the channel. I've got a whole bunch of new videos coming up really soon that I know you guys are just gonna dig. And please feel free to stop back anytime as we together continue the conversation on movies, music, and monsters.
Movies, music, and monsters.